Hey everybody, I'm so glad to be here today. I want to thank Sheila for having me, and I want to lift up the mood and bring some smiles and laughter. So if you're in, I'm in. What do you say? You want to do this? All right, let's go. All right, so the first thing you need to know about me is that I am a little bit of an awkward person. And I'm also an extroverted person. And I'm also a very confident person because I know who God designed me to be. I know whose I am and I know who I am, which is great. The problem is when you take awkward and extroverted and mix it with confident, sometimes it can come off a little strong. Take the other day, for instance. I was in line at a red light, and I was behind this pickup truck, and I noticed the guy in front of me had this sticker on his back glass, and it said, "Do you follow Jesus this close?" And I thought, "Mister, I'm not so sure you want to know my answer to that question." But the truth was, I was also in kind of a whimsical mood that day. So at the next light, I pulled up next to the guy. And I did one of these. I waved for his attention and I did one of these, which for you young people, I know we don't roll our windows down that way now, but it's still the universal sign for roll your window down. So I did that, and he did roll down his window, and he looked over, leaned across his truck, and I said to him, "Even closer!" To which he replied, obviously, "Huh?" And so then I said, "Mister, if you want to know how closely I follow Jesus, well, buddy, I'm going to have to drive on up into your back seat. He lives inside of me. He's literally here right now. We do everything together." And about that time, the light turned green, and he kind of got out of Dodge. May have left a little rubber on the road when he did. That didn't stop me, though. Once I was started, I also had to add, "Well, I also eat his body and drink his blood." I mean, he asked, right? I had to tell him. So, that's awkward me, and yes, I've always been this way. Now, I didn't grow up in the church, but I did start going to youth group as a teenager. I went to youth group on Wednesday nights, and that's where I learned most of the Bible stories for the first time. And I want you to picture now, if you will, teenage me sitting on the edge of my seat on one of those metal, old, cold folding chairs way out in the middle of a cornfield in the basement of a country church, just dying to hear what was going to happen next, because our youth leader was telling us this story about this woman who had been caught in the act of adultery. It was saucy, and I was ready for what was next. The next verse was going to be the words of Jesus himself. And I sat there and I waited. And then the youth leader read the verse, and it was, "Let he who is without sin cast the first stone." Now, like all teenagers, I learned with an underdeveloped frontal lobe. And so my reaction on that night was, "Say what? Jesus is gonna go first?" I mean, I may not have been raised in church, but I had aunts who took me to Sunday school a little, and I did not see this coming. I mean, I'd always heard super nice things about Jesus. I did not expect him to be like, "Move over, boys, I'll handle this." Yeah, that definitely caught me by surprise. Although, I had heard something about him teaching his pupils with curveballs And, maybe this was one of those parables, I figured. So I left it at that. And to be honest, I want to give teenage Bran a little bit of a break because you see, guys, every bit of my life, the entirety of it, up to that point, had been lived in the 1980s. It was a magical, yet questionable time. And that's just something that people my age know to be true. Both facts. Yeah. If you don't believe me, ask Bandit, the dad from Bluey. He'll tell you. It was the 80s. It was a wild place. And I'm going to stop right there, put a pin in the 80s, because I just know in my heart that there are people in this crowd today who aren't getting that reference, who don't know about Bluey yet. And, well, let me sum it up to you like this. There was a pandemic, and along came the adorable, yet poignant, little blue cartoon Australian dog that none of us knew we needed, but we all did for real life. And if you're one of those families and you're like, I'm hearing a lot about this Bluey show, but my youngest kid is 8. We've missed it. It's too late for us. That's a lie. And I want to rebuke the devil right now, because if you're not watching Bluey because you think you've outgrown it, well, you should know that my teenagers and my husband and I are just as excited when they come out with new Bluey episodes as my elementary kids. So you've been told, and I'm washing my hands of this situation right now. Your Bluey blood is not on my hands. So go watch it. All right. Where were we? We were in the 80s. Let's get back there. So first, let's kind of visit one of the magical parts of the 80s, and that is Saturday morning cartoons. Okay, so we didn't have cartoon channels. We didn't have on demand when I was a kid. What we had was Saturday morning cartoons, and you didn't have school that day. And you would kind of camp yourself out in front of your family's one television set and just live your best life every Saturday morning. And the cartoons were good too. We had the Smurfs, we had the Snorks, we had Alvin and the Chipmunks and the Gummy Bears, and the list goes on and on and on, okay? So that was a magical part of the 80s. Over here in the questionable part of the 80s, well, if you were a talented musician and you wanted to put out a song, well, I'm sorry. Just having a good voice wasn't enough, because in the 80s, we also required you to act out that song in a very elaborate and dramatic portrayal through what we called the music video. Not only that, but your wardrobe, oh yes, we expected you to be dressed very eccentric from the top of your big hair all the way down to the tip of your snakeskin boot. It's the only way you could sing a song in the 80s. And, sometimes people today, they get very impressed by the Masked Singer or The Voice. And I wonder, have they ever seen videos for Turn Me Right Round or Total Eclipse of the Heart? Because those are pretty wild concepts too. I mean, if you haven't seen the video for Total Eclipse of the Heart, I'm not going to go on record as recommending for you to Google that. I don't want to be responsible for your nightmares. Because the truth is, let me just set the stage. I'll give you a brief description. A woman sings dramatically into a crowd of anonymous people who have piercing white lights where their pupils should be, staring back at her. And this repeats again and again and again. And yeah, I'm just telling you, don't go home and Google it, because you might not sleep tonight. In fact, I know you won't be. And if you're like me, I grew up without cable, and if I ever wanted to watch these things, I had to watch them at my grandma's house. So you might end up in a scenario where you're not going to be sleeping. You're going to be tossing and turning around all night, bright eyes. And let's face it, your grandma's couch is already too small, and you're already sharing it with Ozzy the cat. Is that really a scenario you want to find yourself in? I don't think so. All right. So you get to decide from the context that I've given you. Alvin and the Chipmunks and the Smurfs, Flock of Seagulls and Madonna, the 80s. Do with it what you will. But I suppose it's time for us to leave the 80s and get back to our own time frame and reality here for a minute. I was at Walmart the other day. Yeah, that explains a lot, doesn't it? Yeah, I saw it. There's a lady in the back, and she's like, it all makes sense now. Why she escaped to the 80s and talked about cartoons a lot. She's been to Walmart a lot, and she needed that little break. And that's the truth. I wish I didn't have to go a lot, but I'm a mom, so unfortunately, I find myself there more than I prefer. So on this day that I went to Walmart, I hadn't made it 2 aisles deep into the store when a woman on one of those motorized carts came barreling out of the aisle and almost took me out. Now, I didn't see her coming, so my reaction was that I froze because I was stunned. And she got her brakes on just in the nick of time before plowing me. And so I'm not quite sure why. But the next move she made was to hit the gas again. It was a real dodge or die situation. And I'm here today to tell you the story. So obviously I dodged. She just kept on zooming. But she did yell back, "Sorry, honey, these things aren't easy to stop." I think it's time to take Rita's license. And it's well past time for Walmart to add auto breathalyzers to those carts. Can somebody get on that, please? Please? Yeah. Anyway, so I continued through Walmart to get my belongings when I saw someone I knew. And let's kind of talk about that for a minute. When you see someone you know, but your brain hasn't finished computing yet, so at the moment you maybe don't even know who they are or where you know them from. Like, for instance, you see someone and you get real excited and you're like, "Oh my gosh, it's Miss Pearl, the teacher's aide from elementary school, and she was always so nice to us kids." And I haven't seen her since, my goodness, when was it the last time I saw her it was compute. It was at her funeral, Brandy. That is not Miss Pearl. Back away. Do not hug this woman. Yeah, just smile and wave and go about your business. So thankfully, my frontal lobe is a little more developed and I fall into less of those situations. But I do have to say, Back when I was a teenager, I didn't always stop myself in time. My grandma had this cousin named Patty, and they liked to tease one another when they ran into each other in town. So one day I ran into Patty. We were in the grocery store, and I came up behind her, and I thought, well, she's going to recognize me and from my silly granny. And so I said, "Hey, Patty!" And, of course, this woman turns around, looks me in the eyes, and sizes me up. And her face really said it all. It said a lot of things. It said, "Who are you, strange child? Are you into things you shouldn't be? And why are you calling me goose liver?" So, yeah. This day in Walmart, I'm thankful that the computing finished and filled me in before I made that same mistake. Because, when I realized who it was that I saw, I rationalized that the 1980s version of Meg Ryan, as seen in the movie Top Gun, Mrs. Goose herself, probably doesn't shop at my Walmart. But a little boy with the same adorable moppy-haired blonde hairstyle apparently does. And I decided not to take his mama's breath away by asking if she agreed with me that he was Meg's tiny little doppelganger. I just smiled and waved at them and continued on my way. Now, about this time, I was headed to the self-checkout, and I was kind of struggling. I was waddling with my arms full. Why was I going to the self-checkout? Well, because the only aisle with a real cashier was also the same aisle, the only aisle that sold tobacco products, and That line stretched all the way back to the sporting goods section where I assume Nate Bargatze is still looking for a hammock. So I got in line at the self-checkout and waited there. Now, why was I waddling? It was because I lied to myself when I got to Walmart that day, as we often do, and said, I don't need a cart. I'm only getting 2 items to get through until payday. When in fact reality had now set in. And I was now holding an industrial-sized package of toilet paper with 5 other items in my arms, not just to get through the week, but just to get dinner on the table that night. Can I get an amen? So finally, it was my turn to go work for Walmart for free. I got up there and I got all of these items scanned. And just like that, the little robot that runs the self-checkout started mouthing me. Can you believe that? I mean, it was like, do you want to help fight hunger? And I was like, do I want to fight hunger? I sure as heck wouldn't be at Walmart if I didn't. What do you think of that, droid face? And R2-D2 had the lamest comeback ever. It was like, well, do you want cash? And I was like, do I want cash? Yeah, we just paid the mortgage. Of course I want cash. I mean, do you think I would buy this toilet paper here where it's only going to last us a week as opposed to buying it at Sam's Club where I could get by for a month if I didn't need cash? How much you giving out, Rosie? Well, I'm going to have to stop this right here and cut to the chase and let you know. The whole thing was a scam. I said yes one time, and do you know that thing had the audacity to take the money right out of my own bank account? So, you're welcome. I've saved you the trouble. Don't fall for it if the Terminator tries to pull this scam on you at the checkout too. Yeah. So I got my items, and I headed to the car. I had some sauce to make because, as mamas, sometimes we're Betty Crocker, and sometimes we're Chef Boyardee. A truer statement may have never been spoken. Am I right? So on this day, I was going to be Betty Crocker and make my family a lasagna from scratch. I got home, and I started making my sauce, but then I couldn't find my sausage. And I hadn't bought it on that day, so I looked in, the logical places where you would find sausage, the refrigerator and the freezer. But it wasn't there. But I'm going to tell you something. I've lived with 5 other people for a long time. So my next move was to start looking in the illogical place that I've found things through the years. It wasn't in the shoe bench. The sausage wasn't in the pantry or on the produce cart. And it wasn't on top of the washing machine. But you already know where it was, don't you? Somebody in here knows, right? That's right. It was in the back of my van, half cooked in its own package from sitting out there in a massive heat wave for 2 days. Yeah. Oh no, I was happy because I found it easy this time. The last time my people left meat in the car, I found it the other way. And you better buckle up because I'm about to tell you that story now. Somewhere between 1 and 3 weeks this went on. I would say I have 4 kids, and I would say to each of them at various times, hey, why don't you go out to the garage, to the deep freeze, and get out that ham Mommy bought? We'll thaw it, and I'll make it for dinner one night. Well, I just felt like I was repeating, like I was a broken record, and nobody ever got that ham. And so at some point, I decided, if they're going to disrespect me, then I'm going to let them live with the consequences of their actions, which is me not making them a delicious ham, right? So that's what I went with. But of course it didn't stop me from complaining to my husband about the whole thing. And I expected his full support, but do you know what I got instead? He said I was crazy. Can you believe that? This man, I love this man I pledged my life to, said I was crazy. He said he'd gone out to the garage because he was kind of tired of hearing me ask to get the ham himself, and he couldn't find it in the freezer. Now, let me tell you something about this guy. My husband is, without a doubt, the best man I know. But no one has ever accused him of being king of the mushroom hunters, if you know what I mean. Right? I mean, my mom used to use this phrase when I was a kid, and let's just say that it has come up a few times in our marriage. And that phrase was, if it was a snake, it would have bit you. So I knew that what I really needed to do was get out there to the garage and get that ham myself. The problem is that I never thought of it when I wasn't in the shower or, supposed to be sleeping in the middle of the night, my arm up to my elbows in something I was cooking or whatever. And so the mystery just kind of continued for that amount of time. Until one day, I was pulling into a parking spot at Once Upon a Child, while also wondering, what smells so bad on this side of town? And at that moment, I realized, oh no. Oh no, the smeller's the feller. I'm the smeller and the feller. I'm the smell. Whew. I didn't need visual confirmation. I just knew. And let's face it, the lady in the parking spot next to me probably did too. Because that ham went from being a mystery to smelling like a back alley in New Orleans the day after Fat Tuesday in the blink of an eye. Whew. So now I had a problem on my hands. But in this strip mall where I was about to go shopping, there was no trash can in sight. So I rationalized that I would go in the store and get whatever clothing item it was that I needed for whichever kid, and then I would drive around until I found a dumpster to dispose of the dead body that I had been stuck with. And maybe if it was a good day at Once Upon a Child, I would find a little raincoat while I was in there, and I would be able to use it for some kind of like a little makeshift hazmat suit. And being a resourceful mom, I would then take that raincoat and give it to one of my little kids as a surprise gift later, as one of those, hey baby, when mama saw this little froggy coat, it made me think of you and I just had to get it for you. I love you so much. Yeah, us moms, we're good with that, right? Anyway, so on the way in the store, I called my husband and I said to him, I can't believe this is happening. I wanted the kids to live with the consequences of their actions, and yet now here I am, living with the consequences of my actions. My actions of not standing at the back of the van, barking out orders like some kind of a drill sergeant helicopter mom every time they carry in groceries. That's what I get for giving my kids a little space. So yeah, I was disgusted indeed, and it was by more than just the smell. It was a dark moment for me, a pretty bad moment. But when I walked out into the parking lot that day, things looked a whole lot brighter. Because do you know what I found? There was my husband, and he had come and taken care of business. That's right, he rode in his white pickup truck to rescue his lady from the harm their children had set before her. My prince. He said that ham was buried in there pretty deep. He said it took quite a bit of digging. Said he had to move the basket of card games and the bag set aside for donation, a softball glove, and some petrified French fries before he finally found it. And then he took a breath, and I said, it's okay, baby. Take your time. Now, I want to tell you one thing about this man. He didn't throw up that day. No, it's not his way. He's only thrown up 3 times since I knew him, and we've been married for over 20 years. In fact, sometimes this is annoying. We'll be at Disney World, for example, and he'll get nauseous from a ride, and instead of just letting it up so we can all move on with our lives, he'll camp out with his iron gut in some bathroom for half an hour and leave me sitting on some bench watching squirrels eat crumbs that kids have dropped, just begging for a parade to go by. But I digress. He didn't throw up on this day. He just gagged when he found the ham. And he said it wasn't when he unveiled the ham that really brought the smell to crescendo. It was when he lifted it. You see, he said it just kind of started dripping over his big manly work gloves, down right onto the beef roast it had been sitting on the whole time. Oh, don't feel bad. Don't feel bad for us. I mean, the next week we didn't have to wonder where that one was, right? In fact, maybe now you get it. Why, on the day when I found the sausage in the back of my van the other day, I just rolled my eyes and said, "Welcome to Meatless Monday, people. Mommy is not going back to Walmart." Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. You've been a great audience.